All right, good afternoon, everyone. Once again, welcome to another edition of Detroit Stories Quarterly, or DSQ Live, the show we have just highlighting some of the guest authors that we have in our publication, Detroit Stories Quarterly. I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Robert McTyre, and today we're very pleased to welcome a good friend to both of us, and Dr. John Telford. I'm sure many of you know Dr. Telford, who's also currently a candidate for Detroit School Board, a longtime educator, renowned athlete, renowned a lot of things, activist, all kind of things. John's been around for a long time, but also an excellent writer. And we were very glad he submitted two stories that are in our publication. One was originally called Time. We renamed it called The Last Race, and that ran in our spring edition. And also a story called Home. And we may want to rename that, but I'll talk to you about that later, John. But I did want to say, by the way, our editor, Maria, said she loved that story, Home. She
Oh,
really,
that's nice.
yeah, she really loved the story very much. She just told me that today. And that'll be in our fall edition, which will be coming out in a few weeks. And, but yeah, so we want to talk to you, but just before I get started, Doc, I just want to ask you if anything that you wanted to add as we're getting started.
No,
Well,
other
yeah.
than, well, just a
Well-
reminder to everyone, and you're going to do this again, Keith. Our fall edition is coming up, and it promises to be quite an interesting one because, of course, we're dealing with this whole very unusual historic election. So,
Absolutely.
national election. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, like I said, John, we wanted to talk to you. We usually go about half an hour, but we don't hold to that. We may go a little longer with you because we're talking about two stories, and I know you have a lot to say. But I did want to, just start with the first one, The Last Race, which, as you said, was originally called Time, and talk about the thing that I was into. The story, of course, just involves an athlete, an old athlete, kind of looking back on his time, and then he, a younger guy, young cocky guy, Billy, who kind of challenges him, and the older athlete Darnell Jones, who had some great, at least in the story, had some great heydays and was a renowned athlete, but then he wants to challenge the young guy and doesn't quite make it the first time around, but then second time with a little bit of supernatural help, he kind of dispatches with the youngster. And but why don't you tell us about the story and what gave? I know you wrote the story a long time ago, and just tell us what led you to write the story and what you think it's about.
Yeah, the story was published in a Scholastic magazine in a different version. When I wrote the story, it kind of had a downbeat ending because Darnell Jones, who the character Darnell Jones was actually based on my best friend Cliff Hatcher, who was a quarter miler that ran with me when we won the Penn Relays mile relay, and Billy in the story was based on Bullet Billy Smith, who was a world record runner also at Wayne State. We were teammates at Wayne State, and Billy was a specialist in the 100 yards and very cocky, and he was always bragging. So he was a natural for the character Billy in the story, and Cliff was a natural because Cliff had been a really great high school quarter miler, but he never quite achieved the success that he should have achieved in college for a variety of reasons. I just based that story on those two guys, and for Detroit Stories Quarterly, with the help of your editorial skills, I changed the ending and put in a supernatural twist, which you guys kind of like in Detroit Stories Quarterly. So we had Darnell Jones coming back in a ghostly presence. So when can I tell the ending? I don't know.
Oh, absolutely. Go ahead.
And he won the race after having lost the race in the physical life flesh to Billy.
What, have you? Now, I know you wrote this story, and as I said, we have another story of yours coming up next edition. Hopefully, some more to come. But have you written much fiction, or this? How much fiction have you written?
Well, I wrote. My last book was a piece of fiction.
John, you're freezing up there. Can you hear us? I don't know, Sananda. Let's see. Looks like you might be freezing up. Let me see if I can get a hold of, let you know, and hang on just a second here.
Yeah, probably some bandwidth issues.
Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Okay, while we have everybody, we just want to mention that Dr. Telford will be back with us pretty shortly. He had a little bit some computer issues. But while we're waiting for Dr. Telford to return, Doc, I just want to get you, I mean, with that first story,
Yeah.
the last race, what was your take on the story when you first read it and edited? What were you thinking about it?
Well, you know, Keith, for whatever reason, and I guess this is because, you know, some stuff gets entrenched in your mind, and your name contributes to this. I always think about Jesse Owens.
Okay.
Whenever there's anything where there's track or running or what have you, that really is, you know, because there's such a historic significance to, you know, what he did. But then also just the idea of running track and it being such a competitive thing, and you know, a person really has to be skilled in that area,
Right.
to be successful in it. But then there was this generational piece too that I liked, you know, because you know you had you know, Darnell and you know, dealing with this prideful competitor and all of that. That
Right.
really, I think, set it up nicely. I think it conveyed.
Well, I think we can get it.
Yeah.
Okay, there. All right, John, I think
I can see you.
can you see me? Okay, there we go.
I think we're back in.
Yeah, it's a little,
Yeah, where were we? I can't remember what you were asking.
oh yeah, I was asking you, yeah, had you written much else, fiction, other stories of fiction?
Mhm.
Oh yeah, well the only work of fiction I ever had published was a dialogue between God and man, and that was my last book. Um, um, the
Yeah,
book
go ahead
that
and
I wrote.
let our viewers know what was the name of that book.
You know what? I'm trying to remember the title of my own book. I'm almost 85 years old. I forget things, but
That's okay.
it got some pretty good action. Um, um, it's probably somewhere in this house. I see her running around trying to get the book, maybe.
That's okay. Yeah, but
I can't remember.
But
You've got a copy
while
of
we're
it
getting
too.
that, yeah, we can get back to, because we will definitely, you know, let people know about the books that but the books you've written, because you've written a number of books, you know, and they're
This
all
was the only fictional.
right. That was the only fictional one, and
Yeah.
I wanted to ask also, in terms of when you were you talk about what gave rise to the characters for Billy Smith and also for Darnell Jones. I wonder if you could talk just a little bit about your track career, because I know a lot of our viewers, I know about it, but other people don't really know. If you give a little bit of background to that story.
Well, my track career, oh, here's the book, The Poet Emperor of Earth. That was,
Okay.
and Tsunami just got it for me, my friend Tsunami.
Okay.
She just got my book, The Poet Emperor of Earth, an in-depth dialogue with the deity. That's my
And they can purchase that on Amazon. Is that right?
Yes, you can get it on Amazon.
Okay.
My book of fiction.
Okay.
But my track career probably molded my life, really. I was very fortunate to
Yeah, your volume just went out again. Hey, John, we can't hear you.
including my autobiography. I wrote an autobiographical book. Uh, this one is wrapped in cellophane, but it's called A Life on the Run: Seeking and Safeguarding Social Justice. It's really more about my civil rights activities than it is about my running. But my running certainly shaped my life in many ways. I've been very fortunate to have been to have been born with the ability to run very fast when I was young. And it got me educated and it got me traveled all over the world.
That's great. That's great. Doc, what
Yeah, I wanted to ask, as a writer, um, tell us a little bit, just kind of walk us through how you approach writing. You know, everybody's unique, everybody's different. Is this something that do you keep a notepad with you all the time and you jot down ideas, or, you know, what's your approach to writing,
I
Dr.
do that with poetry because sometimes I get a poetic phrase, and I have a poetry book too. You know, this book was published by Detroit Inc., as a matter of fact, Detroit Inc. Publishing, and it's the lifelong poetic prancings of Mad John. This is my book of poetry. And when I get an idea for a poem, sometimes it hits me in the middle of the night. And then I get up and feverishly try to find a pen and a scrap of paper to write something down. Also, I've lost a lot of my poems in various homes and marriages where I've been. I left poems behind, and I've tried to recover them in my head.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'll remember a phrase that I was missing for about 10 years, and it comes in the middle of the night, and so I write it down, and I can rewrite and recover that poem. But as far as ideas for fiction, I think most of them have been based on experiences that I had in one way or another. Certainly, the book about Darnell Jones and Billy was based on real life characters and real life experiences that I observed. So was Home, because when I was a young fellow, I was an athlete in a predominantly African American school in the 10th grade, and I had many comrade like experiences with my teammates who were African American. I was the only white runner on a relay team in that school. I was the only white running back on the team, and you know, being a teenager, you know, you have romances, and I had some romances with young ladies of color, and so I remembered some of those romances and put a story together based around such a romance, and that's what Home basically was the theme. I also have another story that I'll probably submit to Detroit Stories Quarterly at some point, and it's called The Reckoning. That was another story that was in a Scholastic magazine years ago.
Okay.
And I might submit it to Detroit Stories Quarterly verbatim, and then again, you guys might want to change something. I don't know, because you do a good job of editing.
No, we'd love to see it.
Keith, I wanted to follow up, if you would. Home, that story, Dr. Telford, touched me deeply because it really resonated with the time that we're in, you know, where we're dealing with social justice and racial issues. What you did, and you did it so skillfully, is you conveyed the presence of racism in a situation where it was reversed, you know, and it's
Right.
when I think about it, it's not really reversed racism, you know, and that's what, because I said, oh, he's dealing with reverse racism, and I stopped myself and I said, you know what, that needs to leave my lexicon, because the truth is, whether there's racism by, you know, whoever it is, it's still it's an ugly thing, and your story shows so eloquently the destructive results of that, you know. Yeah, and if you want to speak to that, I know, I'm assuming you dealt with that, being an athlete and so forth over a period of time.
Well, I have always fought racism. I've been an administrator in white school districts where there was a tremendous amount of racism, particularly when I was hiring Black principals and teachers, and got a lot of flack from the community, even up to and including my house being shot up in the middle of the night one time. That was when I was in Rochester. But in some of my poems, I attack racism. I know that there's one poem that had a couple of neologisms made up words in them, and one of the an aspect, a phrase in one of those poems was, racism is craisism, because really that's what it is. I mean, racism is a form of insanity. I mean, to judge someone by the color of his eyes or his ethnicity or his religion or his background is a form of lunacy. And we've got a man in the White House right now who ascribes to this. He is a racist, very clearly. Many statements we've heard him make, and we've got to get him out of there. And of course, I do have a radio show too in Detroit, and I'm constantly attacking him, twice a week, with the sincere hope that we can return the country to some form of sanity and get that monster out of there.
Yeah.
I don't think
Keith,
you
go ahead.
definitely would not disagree with that here. I also want to kind of go back with when you're talking about, as Doc said, about the racism in terms of whatever color it comes from, and I definitely agree with that. I think, but I want to push back a little bit, because also the way I read it as well, in addition to the racism, in terms of the black father saying, basic, you're a nice guy, but you're not going to date my black daughter, and that's the end of that. There's also kind of a twist in that, in the sense that I think from a black perspective, there's that fear in terms of what may happen to his, I think from a white perspective, there's the deep racism in terms of, you're dirtier than. I mean, the black perspective is that if some white man's with my daughter, it puts her in danger, and
Right.
and also not trusting. I mean, like, you may be nice, but you're white. And his experience with white, I mean, and that's all I did. It's all racism. Racism infects in so many ways. It affects your ability to see that this is a decent young man who may be the best thing that could ever happen to my daughter, but he can't see past what he knows and what has happened to him, and talk to that if you can.
Well, that story was set in 1951,
Right.
in the early 1950s. And in the early 1950s, I was dating African-American girls, but it certainly wasn't something that was accepted. I dated girls of
It was
all races.
illegal, I believe, wasn't it? And in some
I'm sorry?
states, it was illegal in some states, wasn't it? At
Well,
that time.
it has a very ugly word. It's called miscegenation.
Yes.
In some states, at that time, interracial marriage was illegal.
Yeah.
It was not illegal in the East. And as a matter of fact, when I was a runner at Wayne State, I was dating a girl in New York who was African-American. We did consider marriage at one point. The reason we didn't do it didn't have anything with race. It had to do with race. It had to do with geographical distance, but
Sure.
I was fortunate that I was raised by two very liberal parents. I brought girls of all ethnicities and races home with no problem. My father was a Scottish-born boxer who was a tremendous liberal. He was also bodyguard to Walter Reuther, but he had saved an old black man from getting stomped to.
Oh boy, this will be missing one of the best parts. I've heard this story before.
Yeah.
John, can you hopefully come?
Okay.
We can't hear you quite yet. Hopefully, John will be coming back here.
Experience that I had, because there were many white families that would be worried if their daughter or son came home with someone of another race. I was fortunate not to have that kind of a family, so I grew up in a slightly different environment in that respect.
And you said that your father was, I just want to make sure, because a lot of you, I mean, this is, I know you lived through it, so it's not as big, sometimes as big a deal to you who kind of hear this and realize your father was a bodyguard to Walter Reuther, which is a big deal. I mean, talk of it, and some of our viewers may not know who Walter Reuther was or why that was significant.
Well, he was a union leader. My father got fired from that job. My father was an alcoholic. That was one of the bad problems with my father's family. They were all alcoholics. They were all Scots. They were from Scotland. They were hard drinkers, and he had trouble keeping a job. Quite often, he would not keep the job, and that was a really good job that unfortunately he did not keep. He had that job before I was born. A lot of these things that I found out about my family, I learned from his younger brother, telling me the stories of my father. My father was a boxer, who was you take 3 punches to land one, and his manager, a guy named Archie Silman, who had a gym on Woodward Avenue, used to come and get him out of a bar called the Transport Bar over on McGraw, and take him to Olympia, and he'd knock somebody out in 2 rounds and go back to the bar. You know, that was basically he was married to the bottle, and he was also married to poker. I mean, he was a gambler, and my mother kicked him out of the house for a while. And during that time period in my life, I went a little wild myself because I missed my father. But anyway, that's a whole other story. Maybe I'll write a story about that someday.
Yeah, you should. You should.
Yeah, for sure.
And speaking of that, I wanted to ask you in terms of, because life gives so many stories. One thing we ask all of our guest authors in terms of just the about the importance of stories, and just because particularly in the kind of atmosphere we live in now, with everything that's going so crazy with the current occupant of the White House and coronavirus and everything else, that there's kind of, you can almost feel an obligation to write about nothing but that. But I think our view has been that there's still a room for stories. I mean, the people that can kind of help heal. And sometimes, I mean, I want to just your perspective. What is your view on, in a time like this? What do you view as the importance of just stories during this time?
Well, I think stories can take us out of our real world. Fiction is an opportunity to make that happen, and maybe it's a good thing for us to be writing stories that don't necessarily focus on the challenges that we're dealing with today, such as Corona and such as the global warming that's right around the corner that we're going to be facing very shortly. But on the other hand, I think it might be good to write stories about these things because they could help our young people deal with them in a logical way, in an illogical setting, in an illogical world, in a challenging environment that we're in at this moment in history.
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, I think the way I look at it is also in the same way. And sometimes you can tell a deeper truth with fiction than you can with, a straight non-fictional approach. You can shine a lot on something, and people will understand it in a different way.
Yeah.
And
yes.
I think that's what we're trying to do too. I think with Detroit Stories Quarterly is to give people, we talk about it, but give others like yourself a chance to write about story from a variety of different angles that news stories can't really get to. And I think hopefully we're successful in that. Doc, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, just a couple of things. One is I'm interested to know who your favorite author or authors are. And then the second part, Dr. Telford, tell our readers or our listeners, readers, your suggestion on how to go about being successful in writing itself, because you are a successful writer, you're quite prolific, well published, and so forth. So, your favorite authors, and then kind of give us a few sound bites on some gems of wisdom in doing well in writing.
Well, this will probably surprise you, but my favorite author happens to be Alexander Dumas. I liked his Three Musketeers, his 20 Years After, his Louise de la Valliere, his Viscount de Bragelonne. I read all those books when I was just a kid. I was a weird kid. In fact, I used to skip school and go to the library and try to find these books off in the stacks. And every now and then I'll revisit one of the Dumas books. What was the second question, though, Dr. McTyre? I didn't hear
just any suggestions on how a up and coming writer can better him or herself. What are some things that a person who's aspiring to be a writer? What are some things that you would suggest that can really set that person on the right path to doing that?
Okay. Oh boy. Can you unmute?
Oh, am I?
No, you're not. Here's his.
Oh, yeah, you need to unmute, doctor. Yeah, there you go.
Okay.
Am I unmuted?
Yeah.
Okay, what should an aspiring writer do? One of the things that I would say uh, to an aspiring writer is just, sit down and write, have some discipline, force yourself to do it.
Yeah.
Many of my books I wrote when I was working hard at other jobs, but I would write in the middle of the night. I just had that overwhelming urge to express myself. You have to, I think it's a natural thing. You have to have that urge. Um, uh, there are many things in life, experiences that lend themselves to a good story. Um, there are some things that I probably could have done a better job of writing had I waited a few decades and lived a while before I wrote them.
Mm,
Uh,
yeah.
but I think every writer has to approach it from a different perspective,
Yeah.
from his own life experiences.
I had the experience of being an emergency medical technician some years ago, and I wrote a book about it as I was going through that. And,
Wow.
I look back on that book now, and it's so raw and it's so honest, but it
Yeah.
also, I didn't have the distance that I needed from the experience yet. So some of it,
Okay.
honestly, it's very offensive because when you're in that kind of work, the things that the civilian doesn't know, you're trying to survive. So you'll make jokes about things that aren't funny at all, and that sort of thing. And I guess based on what you're saying too, you probably do want to think about what you're writing about. Maybe some things you want to get a little distant sometimes from an experience
Well,
before you reflect.
I'm not 100% sure that I agree with that. I
Okay.
think I think you really have to get into it with your whole heart and soul. And
Yeah.
sometimes you might write some things that people might consider a little bit R-rated,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
and some of my poetry is R-rated. It's not a poetry book for children, believe me.
Hmm.
The same thing with my autobiography. But I've never pulled any punches when I wrote, and I don't think that if you're going to be honest with your readers and with yourself, you have to tell the truth,
Yeah.
whether it's varnished a little bit. I know some people do that. I don't varnish any of mine. It's unvarnished, and I never have done that. I've lived life the same way.
Yeah.
You pay the price sometimes. People might not want to publish something you wrote. People might not want to hire you for some things you said. I haven't gotten jobs that I could have got if I had been if I played the game,
Right.
But you have to be able to look in the mirror too, both as a writer and as a human being.
All right. Well, I think this has been a great. I can't think. I don't have too many more questions. I just want to. I did want to ask John if there's anything else at all that you wanted to say just about being a writer, or just in
Well,
general.
I want to show you this. I
Yeah.
can show you this. Can you see it?
Your screen is frozen again. I can hear you, but I can't see. What are you showing us?
Move back further.
Oh, I got it. I
Yes.
got it. Well, I was going to say that. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. They made my head look a little long, which extended my brain, so that's a good thing. But this is my flyer for
Yep.
my board. I'm running an uphill race.
Yeah.
Politics is not like the quarter mile. In the quarter mile, you're judged by an instrument called stopwatch, which is very democratic. There's nothing democratic about political races. You're I'm in uphill battle.
Right. Well, look, John, thanks so much for your time and for your stories. And like I said, you see, hopefully that the other story that you've got working on, we'd love to see it. If you want to submit that too. So, but
So
thanks.
looking forward to it. You guys are doing a great job. You're doing good things for literature in Detroit, and that's wonderful.
Well,
Keep it up.
You will, and thanks all you do for the community.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, John. All right.
Okay,
We'll see you
brothers.
later.
Yep. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.